What's up, everybody? I am your host, Alien Jesus. That is my co-host, Liquid Lucifer, who is inviting his dad to dinner. And welcome to the Grindhouse Syndicate, where today we are talking about another cult classic film that was written and directed by the legendary John Carpenter. On this episode, we are going to be deep diving into Prince of Darkness from 1987.
Oh boy, JC.
Yep.
Not Jesus Christ, that's John Carpenter.
John Carpenter, who maybe also might be an alien of, what they call it in the movie? A humanoid.
Humanoid alien species
Yeah.
here to warn the Earth.
About bad movies. Yeah, I mean, John Carpenter, man, like, not only does he write a lot of these now cult classic movies, writes them, directs them, and scores them. This is another movie with a really good score.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this. I actually really like this movie.
Super excited. You almost picked it for every week for the better part of a year.
Yeah, it's been on my list for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, this movie is definitely ahead of its time. It is religious horror, technically, that is just flips religious horror on its head.
It's a little bit of sci-fi and, like religious horror movie blended together.
Yeah, I guess it is kind of sci-fi in the sense that there's a lot of science in it.
Yeah. Alien,
Yeah.
Jesus, quantum
Well,
physics.
when I hear sci-fi, I think of like space, but
Well, no, not
very
always the
very little
case.
space. But yeah, so in that case, yeah, it's literally to me the perfect blend of science, religion, and horror. And there's some personal connections with the way they kind of explain in the movie and the story some connections to like quantum physics and religion that I find personally interesting.
Well, yeah, I don't know if we've ever talked about it on the show, but like quantum physics and dimensions and the way that we experience time has always been a big interest between us. And this is kind of a movie where we get to explore that a little bit.
Yeah, it's definitely I had a lot of interest in obviously both of those things far before I seen this movie, and there was some connections and it's just it's very interesting, and I thought a super smart idea that was way ahead of its time. Quantum physics was not nearly as studied as it is today when this came out.
Yeah, another thing is like I've always been really interested in you picking this movie because I had no idea what it was. And after watching it this week, I realized I had seen a couple parts of it on TV growing up. There was some familiar things about it, but honestly, like the actual plot was totally new to me. I can confidently say that when I had caught it on TV younger, it was just something I caught on TV and had no fucking idea what was going on. So this is really the first time I understood the story, watched the whole entire movie, and it's very complex, but very interesting.
Yeah, I will say on the second watch, it was even better for me because there's certain things that if you pay really close attention to, you might not catch the first go round. And if you're familiar with just the basic form of quantum physics, there's certain things that they talk about that the average viewer might not catch.
All right, well, with that being said, are you ready to dive into Prince of Darkness?
I am as ready as Alien Jesus was to come save the world and get crucified.
All right, let's do it.
Hello, boys and ghouls. If you want to stay up to date on what's going on with the show, talk about or submit your movie requests, or just say die, then I got good news for you. You can always find us at one of our social media accounts or our official website at Grindhouse.Horror.Pod.com, Facecrook at the Grindhouse Syndicate Horror Podcast, Instascam at GrindhouseSyndicate.Horror.Pod, and many gore, which you can always find links for in the show notes as always. And you know what I always say, the morgue, the merrier. So please subscribe or follow for alerts on new episodes. Now, back to the show, kiddies. Frights, camera, action.
And if you really love us and don't want us to join Alice Cooper's evil homeless person gang, give us a review. Prince of Darkness is a 1987 American supernatural horror film written, co-scored, and directed by John Carpenter. It stars Dr. Loomis himself, Donald Pleasance, the legendary Victor Wong, and Jameson Parker. It was produced by Larry Franco Productions and Alive Films. It had a budget of $3 million and a box office of $14.2 million. It is the second installment in Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy, which began with the greatest film ever, The Thing, and concludes with In the Mouth of Madness from 1994. The story follows a group of quantum physics students in LA who are asked to assist a Catholic priest in investigating an ancient cylinder of liquid discovered in a monastery, which they come to find out is the liquid embodiment of Satan. So basically, how this movie came to be was after the terrible box office performance of Carpenter's Big Trouble in Little China, he had become very frustrated and disillusioned with the big studio process of making movies and decided his next film would be a return to low-budget indie filmmaking, where he then signed a 3-picture deal with Alive Films, with them allowing him full creative control over his projects. During his downtime, he had begun researching theoretical physics and atomic theory, which absolutely fascinated him and inspired him to write a story that included these subjects along with religion. When asked about this, he said, quote, "I thought it would be interesting to create some sort of ultimate evil and combine it with the notion of matter and antimatter. This idea would eventually develop into the screenplay for Prince of Darkness, which, if you pay attention to the credits, you will notice he didn't use his real name. He actually used the name Martin Quatermass."
Huh.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that.
Yep. Now, the main idea for this story actually came from a dream that Deborah Hill had, where she described seeing a vague dark figure exiting a church, which automatically filled her with dread. Carpenter loved this and decided to write the whole story around this event, which we see multiple times throughout this film.
Yeah, the dream sequences that he does with Deborah Hill's dream, I guess that inspired it, are some of my favorite shots of the entire movie. Like they're all super, super creepy.
Very creepy. That's kind of another aspect that I think kind of comes into play of the science fiction part, is we get like a very tiny bit of time travel.
Yeah, so we do. They talk about, the actual theory that if you it's not a theory, we proved it now with particle accelerators, but if you can essentially outrun the speed of light, you could go back in time.
Yep.
And in doing so, if you did the math right, you could actually send a message back to a certain point in time, which is interesting. But the way he shot those sequences was just, it's really genius because it was low budget. It's an awesome, like, the cinematography is completely different on those. And he did those by literally using like a handheld camera.
Yeah.
And he shot those and then played it back through a TV and filmed the TV on his actual camera. It's like 35 millimeter. So
yeah, that's actually his voice as well.
I didn't know that was his voice.
That's his voice,
Super creepy.
just modified. Yep.
What a weirdo.
Thanks to his previous enjoyable collaborations, the parts played by Donald Pleasance, Victor Wong, and Dennis Dunn were written specifically for them, which huge shout out to my man Victor Wong, who was in one of my favorite movies ever, Tremors. If you listen to our episode on that movie, you'll remember that he is the one who named the graboids, and I believe he landed number one for my best kill in that movie. So rest in peace, Mr. Wong. All right, so the filming, which only took 30 days, was done in multiple places in or around LA. I believe the church was abandoned at the time, but it is now the Union Center for the Arts in downtown LA, just 2 blocks away from City Hall. It looks exactly the same.
I'd imagine it's probably pretty close to the USC campus, which is where a lot of the movie was shot, like the college campus
Yeah.
parts of the movie.
Yeah, so the church basement scenes were actually shot in a big rundown building in Long Beach that was originally used as a popular ballroom. It was in such bad structural shape that the cast and crew had to sign waivers stating that if they were to be injured, they would not sue the property owner. For most of the beginning of the film, Carpenter chose to use his former college, the University of Southern California, with post-production being done at Walt Disney Studios in Burbank.
Ah, good old Mickey Mouse.
Yep. So the film was released nationwide on October 23rd, 1987, which put it up against Slumber Party Massacre 2, Creepazoids, and The Video Dead, where it did pretty well, but unfortunately fizzled out soon after the Halloween holiday. But it really gained its footing when it was released for home video, quickly being labeled as underrated and a cult classic. To be honest, the thing that I really like about this movie is when I watch it, I totally get that, the feeling of catching like a off the wall good horror movie that I just know like nothing about at 2 a.m. on cable.
Yeah.
It very much has that feel. So I can see why it picked up its steam on home video.
Yeah, it did a lot of television runs too, and so I seen a thing, I haven't seen this version of it, but they had actually changed a couple things, major things with the version of it that was seen on TV, but in reading through comments, a lot of people did catch it that way. Like literally at 2 a.m. on like TNT
I
or
think that's how
USA
I
or
seen, yeah.
something and it was just happened to be on and people were like, holy shit, this movie always stuck with me. And I never knew what it was.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's kind of the chunks of it that I saw.
I also love that he shot this movie, like, he went from making these massive movies to taking literally, he took it upon himself to go to, I believe it was Alive Films,
Yeah.
a really small production company, took a massive, massive budget cut from what the movies that he was making at the time to make the movie that he wanted to make. He was so tired of dealing with producers and having so many people with their too many cooks in the kitchen
Yeah.
that he essentially was like, fuck that. I'm going back small. That way I can make the movie that I want to make.
Well, his big budget movies were not doing well in the theater, which would cause a bunch of issues with the big studios that paid for it. And when you look back at those movies, like, they're good. They're good movies. They just didn't do well in the theater, but they did amazing in home media, and a lot of those movies now are like these huge cult classic movies.
Yeah, well, you gotta think there's a huge level of frustration too when like some of the big complaints with some of those movies were things that he didn't want to do, and
Yeah.
some producers made him do this, and things got chopped up, and by the end of filming or end of production, the final product is literally only half of the vision that you had. And we talked about this with like M. Night when he
Yeah.
made The Visit. He had all this, like, major success after The Sixth Sense, and, it as he started doing bigger and bigger movies or getting, more and more higher budgets and there was more producers, having creative control, and he was essentially putting out these movies that he didn't wanna put out because they weren't his vision at all.
Yeah. So, like I said, it didn't do amazing at the theaters, but considering it only had a budget of 3 million, left a small studio like Alive Films a profit of 11 million, which they were pretty happy about. It also, in 1988, was nominated for a Saturn Award for Best Music and won the Critics Award at the Alvarez Fantastic Film Festival. So, didn't do too bad. On September 24th of 2013, the film was released by Scream Factory on Blu-ray and DVD. Then on February 18th, 2019, the film was re-released on 4K UHD by Studio Canal, with the 4K transfer being genuinely praised by fans. And last but not least, in January of 2021, Scream Factory released the film again, but this time on their own 4K release, which included both a 4K UHD disc and a Blu-ray disc, which included a 2021 4K restoration, commentary by John Carpenter, an interview with Alice Cooper, who is somewhat in this movie, and an interview with special visual effects supervisor Robert Grasmere. Ratings. Let's talk about the ratings. So, Rotten Tom, 63%. IMDb is a 6.7 out of 10. Letterboxd is a 3.6 out of 5. And the Google average audience rating is a 4.2 out of 5. If you would like to watch this movie, you can currently find it for rent on Amazon Prime, Google Play, Apple TV, YouTube, and Fandango at home for $3.99.
I'll definitely add to that. I have the 4K scan Scream Factory, and it is a Blu-ray, but it is fucking good.
Yeah, look good.
It definitely did not look its age, that's
No.
for sure.
No, look great. All right, are you ready to dive into the plot of Prince of Darkness?
I am. Let's do it.
So we start out with the possibly longest running intro to a movie ever, where we see that a very old member of the church has passed away and left a journal in a little box with a key inside behind for someone to find. We then see a priest get called in to examine the items, who is played by Donald Pleasance, and actually does not have a name in this movie.
Yes, he is credited as Priest. So from this point on, I refer to him as Father Loomis.
Father Loomis, I think I called him Priest Donald Pleasance. He'll have a couple names in this episode. So he comes in and he finds a little box with the key and he begins reading through the journal. And what's in this journal is so jarring that he ends up taking this to the higher ups of the church, who have no fucking idea what he's talking about. He then heads to the church where this old dead guy lived, which is pretty much abandoned at this point, and he looks for the door that fits this key. He then unlocks this big metal door and heads inside, and even though we don't get to see what's in there, we find out that it's not good because we then skip ahead a little bit where we see our priest here writing a letter to a professor of physics asking for his help identifying whatever this thing is. So we then cut to Professor Birak's class, where we see him explaining a little bit about relativity and the universe to about 7 or 8 college students. And we see that this is the same professor that the priest was just writing to. So a little bit about Professor Birak here. He is a professor who specializes in quantum physics and primarily teaches advanced PhD students. He has a reputation for being extremely smart in mathematics and physics, but is also known to push his students pretty hard. So after Birak gets the letter, he then meets with the priest who hands the journal over to him and explains the situation. We then see them both head over to the abandoned church where the priest then unlocks the large metal door and heads inside. And this is where we see that this is not a room per se, but a set of stairs that takes you down to the basement. This is actually when the credits finally end.
It is.
It's 12 minutes and 32 seconds into the movie.
It is a long, long intro.
It
That's
is.
one of the changes for TV is they cut this down a lot.
How? It kinda shows the beginning of the story.
I don't know exactly how because I haven't seen that version, but I do know that they did extend the part. So at one point, Brian is, who looks like he's like 40 years old in college,
Yeah, yeah,
and he's kind of our closest thing to a main character.
yep,
He is, doing some schoolwork and the TV playing next to him he's watching, and it's talking about this supernova
yeah.
that's just reaching Earth. And for those that don't know, is supernova is like an implosion of a giant star. And they extend that scene a little bit where then they talk about the book that was found, which is kinda weird because in the actual movie, it doesn't seem like this is, like, a public thing that would be on TV,
Yeah.
but they do talk about the book a little bit, and they cut a lot of the other shit of, like, Brian and
Well, yeah, that makes
Catherine
sense
and all that,
'cause I
yeah,
cut it out here in the plot,
yeah.
there's really no point to yeah, I mean, we'll be fine without it.
Yeah, I think the only important thing in there was the supernova,
The
and
supernova, and we see that Brian is, like, kinda checking out his classmate. He hasn't made a move, but he's, like, watching her, and he's interested in her, but he doesn't actually make his move here until, a little bit further down, but, yeah, that's really it.
yeah.
Oh, and we see, like, Walter and Catherine are friends kinda too at some point, but none of that's really that important.
Yeah, it is awesome where this ends though, where we get the set where this container holding the Prince of Darkness is sitting. This set is by far the coolest fucking set. This was the room you were talking about that was
Yeah,
like they had to
falling
sign
apart.
sign a waiver. They lit this whole thing with like candlelight. It's absolutely fucking an amazing set piece.
Yeah, it's super cool. So during this whole scene, we see the priest explain to Birak that or what this place is and who the guy who died was. So this abandoned church actually belonged to a secret sect of priests called the Brotherhood of Sleep. And they basically lived here their whole lives and kept watch over this thing that is in the basement. The man who died was the last living member of the Brotherhood of Sleep, and he noticed something disturbing about this thing in the basement. So he decided to go to the church leaders and tell them about this, but unfortunately, he died before this meeting took place, which is where our priest Donald Pleasance comes in. So, after walking through these dark underground tunnels, Barak and the priest then enter into this very large room that we see is lit only by candlelight, with the walls covered in crucifixes. And as the camera turns, we see at the very end of this long, dark room is a very tall, very old looking glass canister filled with green liquid that is constantly swirling around. This thing looks super awesome, and I'm going to tell you how they made it at the end of the episode. But one thing I will tell you now is this was 100% a practical effect.
It looks fucking awesome.
It does, and I thought that there would be some kind of, addition, even if it was like an animation edition or something, because the green looks so cool spinning around. But no, it is 100% what you see is what it looks like in real life.
Yeah, I do know that John Carpenter knew that they didn't have the money to do anything in post-production, as far as effects wise. So everything they did had to be
Yeah, it'll look good.
essentially practical. I do wonder where this thing is now. Like where this giant fucking canister that was used for this, like did it get destroyed or is it in some collector's fucking museum in their house somewhere?
No, yeah, well, I don't know. I would say, though, from what I found out how they built it, it's probably still intact. You know,
Yeah, it's big.
there's a part of it that probably isn't, but, we'll cover that in the end. But yeah,
It's like the canister from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, if you took that canister and made it like 10 foot tall.
Yeah. So the priest then shows him this very old, super thick book, and he basically explains that this is like the history book that the Brotherhood of Sleep have written about this thing, but it has been written in multiple different languages, and people have erased stuff and then written over it multiple times. It is very difficult to figure out what this book says. So Birak then asks the priest just what the hell this thing is, and the priest tells him that it is a secret that can no longer be kept. He then says that about a month ago, a lot of changes to the earth started happening because of this thing, which we got a couple glimpses of in the intro, where we see like bugs are acting weird, the new supernova has appeared, and the sun and the moon are doing some abnormal shit. So obviously, shit's about to go down with this swirly green liquid. So after this, we then meet some of our main characters who are in Professor Birak's class. First, we have Catherine, who is very focused on her education and specializes in mathematics. Then we have Walter, who is kind of like a wannabe ladies' man who doesn't take much seriously. The first half of this movie, he's annoying. I don't care for his character at all in the first. He gets better, but the first half, he's annoying.
He gets a little better.
Yeah, he never
I
gets
don't
great,
think
but
he ever gets
no.
good. He's that guy who is always trying to be funny, but is never funny.
Yep. Next is Brian, who is one of Birak's best students and has a major crush on Catherine. Then we have Kelly and Mullins, who we don't really know a lot about them. They're just Kelly and Mullins. So, as they all arrive to the classroom, they find a note posted on the door from Birak that basically says, "Cancel your plans for the weekend because you're all joining me for some research out in the field, which will also include multiple other departments." And that's pretty much all he tells them about this situation. So after this, Brian decides to finally make his move on Catherine, where we see him spark up a conversation and introduce himself, which leads them to hanging out for a little bit, where they get to know each other. Which we see Brian make a joke about how hot girls like her never seem to stick around the physics building, and she does not take this well.
No, she did not find his joke amusing at all.
No. It almost crashed and burns. He does recover and managed to invite her to dinner, but that was a close call.
He does a really good job at recovering.
Yeah.
Because she totally, like, not only did not find it funny, but she took it very offensive.
Yeah. So we then cut to later on that evening where we see Barack finally arrive at the church, where he immediately notices a homeless woman standing outside with bugs crawling on her face, staring up at the sky doing some weird shit. We then see him and the priest up in the office kind of debating religion versus science, where he finally asks just what the priest needs him for. And he explains that he needs them to translate the book and do whatever other tests that could prove what this thing really is in order to convince the public about what it is coming. So basically, this huge religious event is about to occur, and he needs Birak to scientifically prove it in order to convince the world population.
Yeah, there's multiple points where Father Loomis points out that, like, people's disbelief in evil is what is giving it its power.
Yeah.
At least that's what he believes. I believe that there is the supernova has a lot to do with this thing kind of awakening. But he thinks for them to scientifically prove what is going on and to put that out in the public with science backing it, that it'll help people, fully believe and essentially defeat this evil.
Yeah, I do love Birak's response because it's very true. Because he says the world doesn't want to hear this kind of bullshit, which is 100% true. There have been so many end of the world warnings from religious groups that have come and gone and been straight up disproven that the world just tunes this shit out every time they hear a new one.
Well, it's the boy who cried wolf.
Yeah.
Religion has done that many a times.
So later that night, we see Brian and Catherine meet back up where they plan to go have some coffee and a chat, where we then skip to the next morning and we see they have slept together. I guess she just could not resist that thick-ass mustache.
Yeah, she for a character who is very early on, we get the feeling that she is not a fan of men. Like, she
Yeah.
almost has this, like, thing against men. Yeah, I mean, he laid the pipe super quick. She fucked after the second spontaneous coffee date.
Yeah, it's the stash, man. They couldn't resist the stash back then.
Yes, it must be.
So after that, we then jump over to the church where we see that people are starting to arrive. When suddenly we notice across the street that all of these homeless people are beginning to gather while they look up at the sky. And this is where we get our first kind of cameo of Alice Cooper, who almost looks unrecognizable here. Also, as we will see later on in the movie, Cooper's character kind of becomes the leader of this possessed homeless people group. So that's
Yeah.
kind of his part in the movie.
Yeah, it seems like these homeless people, at this point in the movie, you're kind of, confused at what's going on. They're just acting really weird. But as time goes on, we kind of see that their whole objective is to not let anybody leave this church with any information to get to the public.
Yep.
So, kind of what Father Loomis was saying is kind of right. This whatever this evil is trying to contain any information they find out in this church.
So we then see all of these PhD college students at this church, and they are unloading tons of equipment. They're building labs, they're setting up computers, they're going all out. This is a huge scientific effort here. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce everybody now. So we have already met Brian, Catherine, Professor Birack, Walter, Kelly, and Mullins. Next, we have Lisa, who specializes in translating forgotten languages. Then Susan, who is a radiologist that also is an expert in carbon dating. Next is Professor Leahy. I'm not really sure exactly what he's professor of, but from a brief conversation with his students, I think it is some sort of biochemistry. Then we have Leahy's students, Frank and Etchinson, who are also in the biochemistry program. And last but not least, we have Calder, who is the microbiology expert, and Lomax, the engineering student. So a lot of characters here, a lot of names, 14 in total. That's why I wanted to list them all together so we're just all on the same page about who is who.
It's also important to note here that at this point, all these different departments and nobody has any idea at this point other than the main physics professor and Dr. Loomis. They have no idea what they're there to study.
Yeah, no clue.
Yeah, they're just told that to bring their equipment and they're going to be doing essentially some studying of something they have no idea about.
So we then jump over to Lisa, who immediately cracks open this big, thick book and begins translating on her computer, which, by the way, I find Lisa super hot. Like, I am very into smart girls, especially when they specialize in some shit I don't understand. And the way she opened that book up and was like, "Oh, this is going to be easy." I was like, I'm
Or,
into that.
or maybe it's just that she's good looking.
She's
Because like
attractive,
all
but
these girls here are super smart. They're all like PhD, post grad
yeah, but
students.
like Lisa's like the only one that can do what she do. That she in this book's a mess. See, we find out it's multiple different languages. She even like finds a way to translate the shit that was erased. She's a big deal, which I'm gonna bring up later on. I think that's really important for something we see later on. But
Well,
yeah,
I also think she's just take the book away. Out of all the women, she's probably the most attractive.
she's good looking. So as she begins translating, we see on the screen the first page of the book says, "I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify unto you this thing which shall be unleashed." We then head outside of the church where we see the priest has finally arrived when suddenly he runs into that homeless lady we saw earlier, and she starts talking to him about how she's happy that he's reopening the church. But one thing we notice here is her voice definitely has some kind of demonic shit going on with it, and she's also holding a cup of maggots. So that tells you what you need to know.
Yeah, I thought this was a really cool, like, kinda hint and foreshadowing on what's going on with these homeless people. Because when she first starts talking, it's completely normal, and then towards the end of her sentence, her voice gets, like, very demonic,
Yeah, I love that.
and
That's so creepy.
yeah, it is. It's super creepy. The cup of maggots was just, like, just another very creepy thing to add to that scene, and it kinda like I said, it kinda foreshadows, like, these homeless people are kinda under the control of an unseen force.
So Birak, the priest, and most of the students all head down into the basement. Now remember, Birak has not told any of these people what they're there to actually study. So this is the first time they're getting any information on what they're there to do. So they get down there and they're all gathered around this canister with this green liquid spinning around inside. And the priest says, "He is gaining power. I can feel it." And this is where he tells them what he knows about this thing and what he thinks this thing is, according to the Brotherhood of Sleep journals. We then jump to all of the students heading back to their workstations, where we see that half of them are freaked out and scared, and the other half thinks that this is just a bunch of bullshit. So, back downstairs, we see Brian, Kelly, and Walter setting up equipment, where Kelly asks why they don't just open this thing up and take direct samples. And Brian then shows her a computer screen with a bunch of math on it, and he tells her that Catherine is upstairs right now entering in these super complicated equations that Lisa found in the old book. But the kicker is, this book was written 2,000 years ago, way before this kind of math was ever discovered.
Yeah, I think this grabs a lot of the scientists' attention, because you gotta think a bunch of scientists come in, they don't know what they're studying, and then they find out that this religious thing, and they're all most of them probably don't really have the greatest view on religion, and this kinda grabs a couple of their attention.
Well,
Like, they're
yeah,
like, "Oh, shit." Like, maybe there is something going on here.
definitely. But anyway, Brian's whole point is, considering there's a bunch of really weird shit going on with this thing, they want to do a bunch of tests on it before they just open it up and actually take samples. And after he shows her this, she gets kind of creeped out and she starts staring up at this thing as she slowly backs out of the room, when suddenly she accidentally bumps her elbow into one of the monitors, which doesn't seem like a big deal now, but does come into play later on. And right after this happens, we head upstairs where we see that Catherine and Mullins has discovered that there's all these worms and bugs covering the windows, and the possessed homeless people have gathered around the outside of the church, where they kind of just stare at the building.
Yeah, this is the part where if I was here, I'd be getting a little creeped out.
Oh, well, yeah, when you have people, it's nighttime and you're in like an abandoned building and then people start surrounding it, that's not good. Like there's no reason why that would be like, "Oh, that's reasonable." It's not
Yeah,
good.
yeah, and you had these weird bugs and like this black goo shit that's like starting to grow over the windows and surround the building, and you have these homeless people like, you know, surrounding everything, and you're starting to get some info that
It's
defies science.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
now you're starting to think like, oh shit, what have we gotten ourselves into?
We then jump back over to Lisa, who is still translating the book, and as the camera turns to her screen, we see it says, "And the Prince of Darkness was himself sealed, that old life, called the devil and Satan, which deceived the whole world." So this obviously kind of freaks out Lisa and Barak when suddenly Susan comes in and says that she just completed the x-rays of the canister, which showed that they actually can't open it because it has an incredibly elaborate locking mechanism that can only be opened from the inside, which means this thing inside this canister can unlock the lid and get out whenever it's ready. And according to all the signs, it's almost that time. So we then cut to nighttime, where we see that the possessed homeless gang has begun to gather closer and closer to the building, And unfortunately, Etchinson has to pack up and leave because he is covering for Professor Leahy in class tomorrow. He then says his goodbyes and heads out the back door towards the side alleyway. But as he enters the alleyway, he immediately notices a dead pigeon nailed to a cross, Jesus style, which is never a good sign.
No, no, that's probably not a good thing to run into.
This, of course, freaks him out, but is quickly interrupted as he turns and looks down the alleyway where he spots the Alice Cooper homeless posse walking towards him holding half a bicycle. This is obviously the stage prop that Carpenter asked him to bring, I guess.
Yeah, apparently at the time he was using this during his live shows, and John Carpenter really liked it and was like, "You can be in the movie, but you gotta bring this, and we gotta kill somebody with
You
it."
got to kill somebody with this. I don't know, half a bicycle. It's kind of a weird thing, prop.
Well, I don't think it was originally the stage prop wasn't half a bicycle. I think they altered it into half a bicycle to kind of make sense for the homeless scene.
Oh, that's still weird. Why would a homeless person have half a bicycle?
I don't know. They're probably. I mean, what does a homeless person normally have? You think
A whole
bicycle?
bicycle?
That is true. Maybe he had to split it with one of his homeless buddies.
Yeah.
They're like, look, both of us can ride unicycles, so we got to split the bike.
Well, I thought it was a fucking unicycle at first until the second time I watched it this week, and I'm like, that's half a bicycle.
You know, that would make a little bit more sense for an Alice Cooper show to impale somebody with a unicycle.
Yeah. So after picking up the bicycle unicycle, he then begins to walk towards Etchinson. When Etchinson says, fuck this, I'm out, but when he turns around to head back towards the church entrance, he is immediately shocked to see the rest of the homeless gang standing behind him. So he's totally trapped in this alleyway, and it's looking like it's the end of the road for him. He then attempts to calmly walk past the possessed Alice Cooper, but doesn't make it very far because he immediately gets stabbed with the bicycle frame, where he quickly dies.
I think it's hilarious that Alice Cooper is like, for at least the Scream Factory version, his face is to cover the disc.
Is it?
Yeah. He plays such.
He's barely in it.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you didn't recognize it when you put the disc in.
I didn't even look at the disc.
Yeah, he plays such like a side character. And even at one point, one of the official posters has his face on it.
I did see that, and I thought it was just like a fan-made poster. That's one of the official posters?
That was one of the official posters.
That's
there was
weird.
some much better posters for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do love that Alice Cooper he loves horror so much, and he has this fame that he uses it to essentially get into horror movies, and he's like, I don't really care what you do with me, just put me in a horror movie. I do
Yeah.
love that about him, because I would do the same thing if I was in his perspective.
Well, it makes sense because his whole persona is
He
horror.
just loves horror.
Yeah. So after this, we then see Brian confront Birak, where he basically demands some kind of answers, because according to all of the data that they had gathered so far, this thing is doing stuff that scientifically shouldn't be possible. He then says that the fluid inside is not slowly breaking down, it is slowly growing a life form, which to him makes no sense and shouldn't be possible. Birak then hands Brian a printed out piece of paper of some of Lisa's translations, where after reading it, Brian realizes what the book is claiming. Now, we, the audience, still haven't found out what this green shit is, but we do know that it pertains to Christianity in some way, and we will be getting our answer here pretty soon. So next we see Susan head down to the basement where she runs into Mullins on his way back up, and she tells him that she just finished carbon dating the corrosion on the lid of the canister, and apparently it is 7 million years old. So way older than the Bible itself.
Yeah.
Thing's fucking
Well,
old,
just
old.
way older than humanity itself.
So after that, we then jump back upstairs where we see most of the group gathered around Lisa as she begins to explain what she has found out after translating the beginning of the book. And this is where we finally get some answers about what is really going on with this thing and why exactly did Priest Donald Pleasance believe this was such a big emergency. So she says the container was buried somewhere in the Middle East eons ago by the father of Satan, a god who once walked the earth before man but was somehow banished to the dark side. Apparently, the father buried his son, Satan, inside the container right before his banishment. Fast forward millions of years later, Christ shows up to warn man of the impending doom concerning the container. And according to this book, Jesus wasn't a human man, but actually a part of an alien race that is extremely similar to humans. So, extraterrestrial Jesus shows up to ring the bell, but he is deemed crazy by the men in charge at the time. The only problem is he has gained a lot of followers and therefore amassed a lot of power. So, of course, they kill him by crucifixion. So,
Yeah.
all that part is the same.
Yeah, they say he had powers that a regular man would not have, so he had gained this following, which makes a lot of sense in real religion.
Yeah.
With Jesus supposedly being able to heal people and do things that other people couldn't do. So they explain that away essentially with him being this extraterrestrial being is what they call it, very similar to man. And I guess the people didn't like that, and they decided to crucify him for it.
Nail him to some wood.
Man,
That's what they did.
I fucking love this part of the story. Like, this is obviously a huge part of the movie. This is where we get, like, if you're not paying attention to this part, you're gonna you lose so much of the substance of the movie.
Well, we talked about this a couple episodes ago where I really love, what do we call it? Like, where they do all the research in the movies and everything, like a research montage.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a research montage, but the reason that, I was saying the reason I like them is because this is where we get our answers to the movie.
Yeah.
This is where we get, our meat and potatoes of the story. And it's
Yeah.
the same thing here. It's one of my favorite parts of the movie.
Yeah, like I said, you gotta pay a lot of attention to it. They tie actual religious history and actual science, and they kinda tie it together in this story. And this movie got a lot of negative criticism when it was in the theaters, and I think a big part of that is people like to be force-fed stories. They don't like to have to think too much.
Yeah.
And I enjoy movies that you have to think a lot and you have to pay close attention to, and that is a big splitting point for audiences, this particular part of the movie, because if you don't pay attention or at least know the base history of these things, you're gonna lose a lot of the substance here. And I think this is where a lot of, like, the critics and stuff kind of bash the movie.
Yeah, I probably won't keep this part in, but the first time I watched it, I'd actually hit my little pen, and I literally rewound this part like 4 times because the first part I was like, "Did he just say Jesus was an alien?" I had to fucking and I was like, "Oh my god, what?" And I rewound it, and then it was talking about Jesus or Satan's been put in this tube for 7 million years, and I'm like, "What?" Yeah.
Yeah, you
Don't
might not
watch this
wanna
high.
be too stoned.
No.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this, so on my second watch, I rewound this. I rewound it and I wasn't stoned.
Okay,
Just to
wow.
make sure that I had all my P's and Q's in line.
Yeah, so back to that's a recommendation. Just don't be buzzed up or anything when you watch this movie for the first time.
Also, and if you have to, 'cause this is a lot of information that comes at you at once, and it's a major part of the story, man, if you have to, rewind it and watch it again.
Yeah, that's what I watched it like 3 times.
Yeah, 'cause it's super important.
Well, it threw me off is
Yeah.
what happened, is I wasn't expecting it to be such, these major changes to something that I've heard my whole life.
Well, I missed the extraterrestrial Jesus part. the first time I watched it through.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, so that was like I knew that Jesus was had been put on earth to warn everybody and that, he was crucified because essentially he knew too much, but his followers had taken this container and the church had hid it for so long. But I missed the extraterrestrial part, and I think that's very important to the story.
Yeah, it is. All right, so back to Hot Lisa here. So, yeah, she tells everybody, like, yeah, they killed Jesus because he was getting too powerful. And his disciples then decided to keep this information about Satan in the canister a close guarded secret until man developed a science sophisticated enough to prove what alien Jesus was trying to warn them about. Which brings us to present day and why the priest begged Barak to help him scientifically prove this. And what's really important here to know is that Satan isn't the one behind all the evil that has plagued mankind. It's actually his father, because as we know now, you have a God and an anti-God. So two very powerful beings, one for good and one for evil. Leahy then asked the priest just how in the hell did the church manage to keep this a secret for 2,000 years, and he says that it was decided long time ago that they would blame all of the bad in the world on Satan corrupting the hearts of men. That way, the existence of the anti-God would stay hidden, and man wouldn't feel powerless and afraid because they remained at the center of it all, which the priest now admits was a terrible idea. I want to shout out here, Donald Pleasance does a great job with the church fucked this up speech in how they basically for 2,000 years sold everybody this big fucking useless lie.
Yeah, I want to shout out Jesus Carpenter here, John Carpenter himself.
Yeah.
Man, that was a really smart way to tie the actual story of religion into this story and kind of tweak things in a way and explain things to make the story make sense, but actually use real history. I thought that was super smart.
Yeah, it is smart. Like, after you just got this big information dump, the little part at the end where they ask him like how this was kept secret, Donald Pleasance, his little speech here, I think is also really important because it does the same thing as like Alien Jesus did, where it takes a real life thing and then kind of flips it on its head a little bit for the story.
Yeah.
And it's really, and I like it. I think that's a good part. I think it was acted really well by everybody that was in this scene. All right, so while the group ponders on this new information, we then jump back down to the basement where we see that Susan is down there by herself and she is fascinated with this container. When suddenly she notices this green liquid begin to drip up towards the ceiling. And when she looks up, she sees this big green puddle above her, which is of course fascinating considering this liquid is totally defying gravity. As she stares in amazement, we then see a tiny piece of glass break out of the canister and begin to spray the liquid right into Susan's mouth.
Right.
So Satan just gave her a golden shower.
Dude, Satan just R. Kelly'd Susan. He either R. Kelly'd Susan or it was a satanic cum shot.
No, yeah. I'm glad to hear both our minds went straight to the gutter on that.
Yeah. Did Satan just shoot life right down her throat?
Yeah. So Susan then falls to the ground where she begins to choke and eventually become possessed. Meanwhile, upstairs, after Lisa finishes briefing everybody about her translations, we see a very similar reaction to the one we saw earlier. Most of the people are freaked out and a little scared, but some, like Walter and Frank, think this is outright bullshit and not worth their time. So next we see Walter walking down the hallway when he notices that down at the other end of the hallway, a now possessed Susan is standing there staring at him. He attempts to talk to her, but she doesn't say anything back when he then gives up and goes to grab a drink.
Susan was she possessed or was she just really pissed she didn't get a warning that Satan was about to come?
Maybe both. Could be both. We then see Mullins walk in and ask him if he has seen Susan, and he says Yeah, she's right there in the hallway. But when they both go to look, she is gone, prompting Mullins to go look for her down in the basement. Now, this is just my personal opinion, but I think Susan was sent to possess Lisa before anyone else, and Walter just happened to accidentally interrupt this. Because Lisa is the only one that can translate that book, and I bet that book has some info on how to put an end to this shit. Because I think she was going to Lisa because we see Walter come in and piss Lisa off, of course, because it's Walter. Lisa leaves, and then Susan's like, "Fuck, Lisa left, so I'll just, catch her another time."
Yeah, that is interesting. And if you possess Lisa, essentially anything that she says from the book at that point on can be altered because
That's
nobody
true.
else can read the book.
That's true.
So she can completely manipulate everybody else by getting Lisa on her side.
Yeah, like there could be a way simpler way to end this in the book, but
Yeah,
no one ever gets in the book far enough to find out anything. So I
it's
think,
like something stupid like flush the toilet 3 times.
yeah,
Just do 3 flushes.
say this certain prayer and stand in front of the fucking green thing, and then the problem solved.
Yeah, have you ever heard of saying Hail Mary 3 times? It's actually 6.
Yeah.
Satan changed that to 3 so nobody would know the code.
So yeah, Mullins goes down in the basement to look for her, but when he gets down there, he gets distracted by a beeping computer which is set up next to the container. And as he begins to try and figure out what this computer is doing, Susan comes up behind him and snaps his neck. So after that, we then cut to 3 men gathered outside behind the church, who is Calder, Lomax, and Frank. And they are discussing everything that they have just been told. And Calder and Lomax believe that they are on the brink of a huge discovery, but Frank isn't buying it, believing that the priest and Birak are full of shit and wasting their time. Calder and Lomax then say they are heading back inside, but Frank says that he is out and heading home. Right after Calder and Lomax leave, Frank then sees Susan open the door, where she proceeds to stare at him like a weirdo while bugs crawl all over her arms. Frank then looks down and notices he is now standing in a large pile of bugs, which have begun to crawl up his pants leg. This dude has the worst reaction time to standing in a pile of bugs I have ever seen.
Yeah, to shit my pants.
He doesn't really move.
They wouldn't
Kinda just-
they wouldn't have to kill me. For anybody who listens to the show, roaches are the worst.
As
I'd
we-
rather be standing in a pile of spiders.
As we learned in the Creep Show episode.
Yeah, roaches are the spawn of Satan, so it makes sense that they used roaches here. And my personal belief, roaches were actually developed by Satan himself and put on the earth. So yeah, I would have shit my pants. You wouldn't have had to come up and stab me 54 times. I would have died of a fucking heart attack.
I don't understand why he didn't just jump out of the pile of bugs. Like he's
Jump
just
out of his clothes.
he's still he keeps standing. Like he's like knocking the bugs off his clothes. But I'm like, but you're standing in a pile of like 1,000 bugs. Like just move.
Yeah.
Just move over.
Or just run home.
Or something.
And as we know,
Just
he
stand
was
there.
he was talking about going home, and as we know, the homeless people do not let anybody escape, even somebody who does not believe what's going on here, because if it comes out in the news that there was all this shit that went down in this church, and he discovers what they were talking about was true, he could,
Yeah.
they don't want anybody that was in this place around this canister getting out and possibly spreading this to the public.
Yeah.
So he's got to die.
So Frank then starts knocking all these bugs off his clothing, which totally distracts him, causing him not to notice the homeless woman that is running full speed towards him while holding a pair of scissors. She then begins to brutally stab him all over while a wide-eyed Susan watches from the doorway.
Bro, do these homeless people not have knives anywhere? This is better than a bike. I will say that. Better than a half a bike.
It's just a half a It's like half a pair of scissors, not even a whole
Yeah.
pair,
Yeah, it
which
looks
kinda
like
makes a knife.
shitty scissors too.
Well, it got the job done.
Yeah.
We then jump back over to Hot Lisa as she continues to translate the book, where we then see on her screen it says, "Be you not deceived of his purpose, for one will be chosen." She then looks down at the book itself, where she sees the words surrounding a symbol that looks like part of a star with a hook at the bottom, which we will see come into play later on because this is the symbol for the chosen human that will be used to bring back Satan.
Yeah, this is another really crucial small detail that you really got to pay attention to catch. The movie's not ruined if you don't see
Yeah.
it, but if you see it and then you catch this symbol coming up, it'll make a lot more sense to you.
So after this, we then do some quick cuts to some of the other characters where we see Leahy ask about Frank, where Calder informs him that Frank went home 20 minutes ago. He then asks about Susan, but they all admit they haven't seen her and assume she must have left too. Next, we head over to the sleeping quarters where we see Walter taking a nap when he suddenly starts having this crazy dream. Now, this isn't your ordinary dream. It's very weird and very important. It basically looks like it was shot on a VHS camcorder, and it is someone walking around the outside of the church during the day. And as they get closer, we start to see a large dark figure standing in the entrance of the building. And the whole time this is going on, we hear a bunch of static and strange, almost like a jigsaw sounding voice that says, "This is not a dream. We are using your brain's electrical system as a receiver. We are unable to transmit through conscious neuro interface. You are receiving this broadcast as a dream. We are transmitting this from the year 19." When suddenly, before the voice can finish the year, Walter wakes up in a panic, believing this to just be a nightmare.
We get quite a couple of these dream sequences here, and they're fucking awesome.
Yeah,
Like,
they're
they're
cool.
super creepy. They're one of my favorite parts of the movie. They're so creepy and unsettling. As you said, this was a dream Deborah Hill had, I
Yeah.
guess, had,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the whole, like, original basis that the story was started and written around, and it's just there's something so creepy and dreadful about these scenes. Like, I don't know what it is, but every time it plays, I think it's a mix between the way they shot it with the handheld camera, and it's very staticky, almost like fever dream like, and then but you have this very creepy, like jigsaw like voice going on in the background, like telling you about this message. And everything about it is just super creepy and super dreadful. And the imagery in it's awesome too. Like you have this church and the church doors are open and you have this like dark hooded cloaked figure which you assume is the prince of darkness, Satan himself.
But this thing is huge,
Yeah,
too.
yeah, it's like massive. It takes up the whole doorway and you had the light shining behind it. And you essentially had this very shaky camera footage coming around the side of the church and kind of almost spying on this
Yeah,
thing, like
yeah.
creeping around the corner and seeing it.
It's very found footage.
It's super awesome.
I think that's the thing is it's very found footage, and I think that one of the things that really makes it creepy is you don't very often or ever see this big black evil thing standing in the doorway of a church, like a big fancy church.
Yeah.
And that those are two things that don't ever really go together. Typically, you picture a church, it's typically good things, like or a fucking angel or some shit in the doorway, not evil. Like
Well,
evil normally can't even be in a church.
it's almost the imagery of evil has conquered good.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Like it has taken like when a country takes another country's capital in war.
Yeah.
Like that is essentially imagery wise what this feels like. This embodiment of evil itself is standing in the doorway of it's now home.
Mhm. So, after Walter wakes up, Brian comes in the room and asks him if he's seen Mullins or Susan because they seem to have gone missing. Also, they just found out Frank went home, which has gotten a lot of the group thinking about doing the same, prompting a meeting down in the lab in half an hour. We then jump back over to Lisa, who has finally gotten tired of translating for the night and decides that she needs to get some rest. She then turns off her computer and heads down the hall to the sleeping quarters, turns off the light, and goes to sleep. But this is quickly interrupted when a creepy Susan quietly walks in, closes the door, and gets on top of Lisa. Lisa then wakes up totally confused by what the fuck this lady is doing, when suddenly Susan opens up her mouth and shoots the green liquid into Lisa's face, effectively possessing her. And I was like, no! Damn you, Susan, you bitch.
Susan just spit in Lisa's mouth.
There's like
and
12 other people you could have got.
It's not nearly as hot as it sounds.
It's not hot. We then cut to Birak, who has fallen asleep in the office when he suddenly starts having that same weird dream we saw Walter have. But again, right before the voiceover finishes the date, he suddenly wakes up with the priest staring at him. The priest immediately asks him what he was dreaming about, which at first he refuses to tell him until the priest informs him that there is something he forgot to mention. On purpose, of course.
Yeah.
So according to the Brotherhood of Sleep, anybody who is in close proximity of the container has the same dream every single time they go to sleep. And they always believed it to be a premonition that gets longer and longer the more time you spend around it. Back over in the mathematics lab, we see Catherine still looking at the computer screen as it calculates all of these equations, when suddenly Kelly walks in and begins talking about how tired she is. Catherine then tells her to go ahead and try to get some sleep and she will wake her up in 45 minutes, when she suddenly notices this mark on Kelly's arm. She then walks over and looks at it while asking Kelly what happened, and as she lifts up her sleeve, we see that the simple bruise has now turned into a symbol, which is the same symbol we saw in the book earlier. For some reason, these two women don't think it's weird that Kelly's arm has developed an obvious religious symbol in her fucking skin.
Yeah, did either one of these two see when Lisa translated? Did they? I don't think
No.
either of them actually seen the symbol. but
Nobody
I-
was in there when
I-
she did that part.
Yeah, I would still though find it really weird that it was this perfect symbol.
Yeah,
I
that's
would
super
actually
weird.
go back and check where I bumped into this thing to see if it had like an
Like a
engraving or
brand,
something.
Like
yeah.
if it was super hot or something, even like that, you wouldn't not notice you just had a symbol burned in your arm. But
I mean, even if it was like, engraved in it though, and you hit it hard enough to bruise your
Yeah.
arm, maybe it would somewhat show up. But yeah, definitely
weird.
weird for sure. And us as the viewer, you're probably thinking mark of the devil. Like if you paid attention to that last part and seen the symbol where they talked about a chosen one, you now see that it appears she has the mark of the devil.
Yep. After this, we then see Calder going around gathering everyone for the meeting when he suddenly comes to the translation room where he spots a very blank-faced Lisa typing on the computer extremely fast. While just staring off into the distance, he then tries to get her attention, but she doesn't respond, where he then walks in a little closer and looks at her screen. And he is pretty confused when he sees what she is typing, because we see that it just says, "I live over and over and over again." Kind of like The Shining. Very similar thing happens in The Shining where Jack's been typing this book, but turns out it's just the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, also, like we talked about earlier, like from the point on when Lisa gets possessed, she's no longer actually translating this book.
Nope.
She's talking through Satan.
Yeah, and then she's just typing, "I live, I live, I live."
There's something just very uniquely creepy about this scene too. The way she's staring off and the speed at which she's typing this thing, and it's just the same thing over and over again.
Well,
Like The Shining was a good example of finding out he was typing the same fucking thing over and over again. It's just super creepy, and the way they shot this scene with the fucking speed typing and her staring off into space, clearly in some type of trance, it was a very dreadful shot.
well, it really reminds me of like shit AI does, where it gets most of it right, but there's always some glaring thing that it managed to fuck up. Like, example in this case is all night she's been looking at this book while typing on this computer. And yeah, she is typing on the computer and she's looking in the direction of the book, but she's not looking at the book.
Yeah.
And she's typing so extremely fast. So it's almost like the evil was trying to make it look like she was just in there doing what she was doing so it wouldn't throw anybody off, but it's just not quite right.
It can't replicate humans the
Yeah.
way humans can.
Exactly, like it's trying, but it's wrong, just
Almost
slightly.
uncanny valley effect
Yeah.
with faces, the way it's trying, but there's just something uniquely not right about it.
Yeah. So she ends up stopping typing and begins typing much slower and normal. And she writes, "You will not be saved by the Holy Ghost. You will not be saved by the god Plutonium. In fact, you will not be saved."
Yeah, the god plutonium part I think is interesting because this, at the time, was a reference to the atomic bomb. Like, not even humans' greatest weapon.
I didn't actually know that.
Yeah, not even humans' greatest weapon will stop me, which was the atomic bomb. And what's very interesting about that is they talk about how this liquid can essentially move through atoms. It can do things, but it needs a human host to kind of complete its cycle, although it can control and manipulate atoms and matter. And an atomic bomb is the actual splitting of an atom. So I thought those two things, when you put those two things into perspective, it was actually, on my first watch, I didn't think anything of it. I thought it was just like a smart science word they put in there, but it really makes sense and adds a lot of depth.
Well, yeah, it does make sense. And like as after you've told me that, I also take it as, well, it says you will not be saved by the Holy Ghost or the god Plutonium, which kind of says you will not be saved by religion or science.
Yeah.
Neither
Yeah.
one of them are going to stop me.
Yeah.
So as he stands there reading this, he then hears the door shut, where he turns around and sees creepy Susan walking in his direction. But before he gets a chance to say anything, he gets knocked out by evil Lisa, where he then gets possessed. So we then head down to the main lab for the meeting, where we see that the only people really left are the priest, Professor Birak, Professor Leahy, Brian, Catherine, Lomax, and Walter, with Kelly still asleep upstairs. And the priest immediately begins to ask everybody who has all fallen asleep and who has had the dream. And as he begins describing it, they're all shocked because they have all had this same exact dream and have no idea how this could be possible. Birak then says that the dreams seem to be pre-recorded, when Brian then mentions tachyons, which Birak agrees is a possibility. Lomax then asks what that is, and Brian then explains that a tachyon is a subatomic particle that travels faster than light, and anything traveling faster than the speed of light would appear to be going backwards in time. Meaning, if this is a real pre-recorded message from the future, a scientist could calculate the exact spot that the Earth was at a certain time in the past and use tachyons to send the message into the past to that exact location, which goes exactly along with what Birak just said, that maybe the dreams aren't caused by proximity to the container necessarily, but someone in the future knowing the location of the container at that time and sending the message back to that location, aka the church.
And that's just another great example. I think this movie is the perfect mix of science, religion, and horror.
It's a very smart movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's they went in and used an actual scientific theory and incorporated that into the story. And once you hear that, it makes a lot of sense because during these sequences, you hear this voice that is sending you this message from the future. And it makes a lot of sense as to how this is actually happening within the story.
Now, this is a huge bomb dropped on this group with them realizing that the future of humanity is in their hands. So, a lot of pressure, to say the least. And as this meeting in the lab is going on, we see Lisa and Susan, who have now removed the container from the basement, are now moving it into the room that Kelly is asleep in. Catherine, who is now walking down the hallway, hears someone yelling hello from outside. And when she looks out there, she sees Frank standing there saying hello over and over again, but it sounds like he's underwater.
It's very, very creepy.
Yeah.
Like this scene right here is awesome.
Realizing that this is really strange, she then calls the rest of the group over, who then all start looking out of the window when suddenly Frank says, "I've got a message for you, and you're not gonna like it." The group then sees Frank's body begin to swell up with hundreds of bugs as his skin turns gray and rotten looking. And he tells them to pray for death, and then his head falls off, followed by the rest of his body parts.
Yeah, well, you literally you realize that his body was just these bugs. These bugs had filled his clothes full of what was his body.
Yeah.
And to like talked through him, this evil talked through him in this super, super creepy voice. And then he literally just falls apart back into like a pile of bugs. Like the suit slowly crumbles. I thought the effects makeup on his face looked phenomenal.
Oh, they were 10 out of 10.
Like he looked
very scary.
Yeah, when you take the combination of the lighting, the makeup effects, and the creepy voice, and then the bugs, essentially like his body deteriorating back into this pile, which you realize these bugs had all like gathered together to replicate the rest of his body.
That's wild.
Yeah, it was 10 out of 10. I fucking loved this scene.
Well, there's another thing too, because like we see his like hand fall off and like one of his arms falls off. And we did see earlier after he got killed that lady kind of cut
his hand off.
Yeah, and so not only are the bugs making up his body, but they're actually also holding parts of his body into place just long enough for him to get their attention to look like a regular person. But obviously, they got tired, I guess, because I think the hand falls off first.
Yeah.
While he's still talking. Yeah, it's just really unsettling.
Yeah, very, very creepy scene. Like I said, it's one that, like, especially if you hate bugs, it just gives that extra kick of just creepiness. I loved it. 10 out of 10.
So after seeing this, the group then takes off running through the church when they suddenly run into a now possessed Calder, who then snaps off a piece of the banister and stabs it through his neck. When he immediately falls to the ground, the group then starts performing first aid because they do not know yet about the possession stuff. They think all the missing people just went home. So it's very important that they have no idea that their colleagues have been possessed. While they are dealing with this, we then see Birak, Leahy, Brian, and Lomax attempt to run for help when they discover that all of the doors to the church have been barricaded from the outside with junk and furniture thanks to the evil homeless gang in order to trap them in the building until this is all over. Next, we see Walter head upstairs looking for Kelly, but when he walks into the room, he finds that the lights no longer work and the container with the green liquid is now set up beside her sleeping body. And as he shines his flashlight at the lid, he notices that the green liquid is now pouring upwards, where we once again see a green puddle of liquid on the ceiling above Kelly. And as he uses his flashlight to investigate further, he discovers that a waterfall of lime green fluid is pouring into Kelly's mouth and eyes, which looks super cool, and it reminds me a lot of the deleted scene in My Bloody Valentine where he, like, rams the back of that girl's head onto the shower head, and then he turns the water on, and it's, like, shooting out of her fucking eyes and mouth?
Yeah.
It's very
Yeah.
similar. So, while staring at this in disbelief, he gets attacked by Susan and Lisa, where he eventually is able to run into the closet and barricade the door. We then see the whole group reunite upstairs in the hallway where Leahy hears the commotion in the bedroom and goes to see what's going on. But right as Walter tries to warn him not to come in, it is too late as we see Lisa spit the green fluid in his face, possessing him. Leahy falls backwards into the hallway, holding his throat and gasping for air. And the rest of the group sees this and runs to help him, but they are stopped short as a possessed Lisa steps out prepared to attack. And when this happens, we see the priest sneak off and hide in a vacant room by himself.
Yeah. Father Loomis got a little scared here.
Yeah, a lot of scared.
For this all being put together by him and then realizing the whole, like, human race is dependent upon him,
Yeah.
he got a little scared. I will say, though, like, they're like spitting cobras.
Yeah.
Like, they'll just spit in your face, and that's it.
Yep.
That's a really hard thing to fight.
Yeah, you need like a shield or
You need
something.
a mask.
Yeah. If only COVID would have been happening at the time. So Lisa then slowly begins walking towards the group as they quickly spot a now possessed Calder and Mullins, now realizing that they are completely trapped and the only place left to go is inside one of the rooms. And that is exactly what they do as they then barricade the door in an attempt to keep all the possessed people out. So the group is now split into 3 different places, with Walter in the closet next to the canister, the priest is in an empty, like, electrical room or something, and Brian, Lomax, Catherine, and Birak are in a room next to Walter. So after things kind of calm down a little bit, it appears obvious that the possessed people are waiting on some kind of event to happen because they're just standing there perfectly still. We then see Walter use his flashlight to look out of this little window in the closet door where he spots Kelly laying on the bed with this huge pregnant belly all of a sudden.
I just want to point out that this window and this closet door that you referenced, this is a confessional.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I didn't pick up on that at all. Why would it be in the bedroom?
I don't.
For you to confess
Well,
bedroom stuff?
I think they moved the bed into that room when she was gonna take a nap. I think they even, like, I want to say that they show her moving it in there, but this is the confessional room.
Yeah, well, right
And
over my head.
yeah, I also think it's really funny that they can hear him so well in the next room.
It's not a
Like,
good
damn,
confessional
they
room.
didn't, like, soundproof the confessional at all.
Nope.
Like, how many people were sitting in that church when it was active and they heard their, like, neighbors fucking their other neighbor's wife or something. The priest is like, say 3 Hail Marys and you'll be fine.
It's like, I let my dog lick my balls. A few hours later,
Sir, that's not a sin. It's not in the Bible.
well, it should be. A few hours later, we see that it is now morning, and Kelly looks a whole lot worse because we see her skin is she's basically turned into Freddy Krueger. That's
Yeah.
what she looks like.
Yes, that was my comp too.
Yep,
She
best way
looks
to
like a
describe it.
female Freddy.
Yep.
And she looks fucking awesome
Yeah.
at this point.
So Walter then attempts to crack some jokes at the possessed Susan and Lisa, which obviously falls flat.
Bro, he is so bummed that they didn't laugh at his jokes.
I mean,
And
they're
like
possessed.
possessed.
Like,
Like, I hate Walter. Like,
Yeah.
he's such a fucking, like, just, he's good for the movie, but, like, if this was a person in real life, like,
oh,
bro,
yeah.
they're possessed, and I took such gratification in him being so bummed, like, the look on his face when they don't react to his joke.
Yeah.
It's like they're literally possessed by the devil, and you're still trying to crack stupid jokes.
Yeah, he's something else. So the rest of the group hear him, and this is where they realize that he is just on the other side of the wall. So they begin to chip away at the wall, in order to make a hole big enough for Walter to crawl through. So while they're attempting to rescue Walter, we then jump over to the priest who is still hiding, clutching his Bible, looking completely broken. When suddenly Calder breaks into his room, but the priest ends up hiding behind this like big heating unit thing. So Calder doesn't see him, but what he does see is this big mirror on the wall that really excites him for some reason. So while they continue trying to break through the wall, we see Walter watching Kelly when suddenly something under Kelly's shirt begins moving around. We then see Catherine fall asleep and begin to have the dream, but this time we get the last 3 numbers of the year, which is 199. So not quite the whole year, but we're getting close.
We know it's the 90s. Doesn't seem that far into the future.
Yeah, this is 87, so they're right on the heels of the 90s. So after she wakes up, we see her talking to Brian, where they kind of profess their love for each other, I guess. It's kind of what happens.
Yeah, after their whole 2 coffee dates and a night of fucking.
Yeah, they have not known each other long enough to be this in love, but whatever. About an hour later, Walter checks on Kelly again, but this time we see that big chunks of her skin have fallen off, leaving just bloody red patches, which makes Walter realize they are running out of time. So he quickly bangs on the wall to warn the others, who are discussing why Satan would need to take control of a human's body, when they then yell over to Walter to continue to watch Kelly and give them updates. And when Walter looks back over at Kelly, he sees that she is now awake and most of her skin has completely fallen off, being replaced by bloody chunks of tissue and clear, shiny liquid.
Yeah, she has surpassed her Freddy look
Yes.
and has moved on to, like, Hellraiser.
She looks like Frank
Frank
from Hellraiser.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
100%.
totally looks like Frank from Hellraiser.
This is Frank's
and-
sister.
Yes, this is Frank's sister for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it was just me, but the first time I watched this, right before this, when she wakes up, she is like swollen from all this liquid in her stomach, and I just immediately thought she's gonna give birth to Satan.
So did I.
And
I was
don't
like,
know if it's so many religious
Yep.
horror movies and Antichrist movies that I've seen, but I'm like, oh my God, how are they going to do Satan baby? Like, that's always my first thought in these movies is, okay, how are we going to do Satan baby? Or Jason Goes to Hell with Jason being a baby, grows into like full grown dressed, beat up Jason.
aged Jason,
yeah,
even
I'm
though
like-
he's just born.
I'm like, oh God. Every time I see it, I kind of roll my eyes. I'm like, okay, how are they going to do it? And, I'm okay with like the ones that it's a baby and it's like the Antichrist and it's going to grow up and be the Antichrist. But I'm like, okay, this is Satan himself. How are they going to do it? And then I was very pleasantly surprised when the swelling went down and it's just her.
So when they showed that, I was like, I said out loud, oh, dude, don't do fucking the birth to the Antichrist or something.
Yeah.
Fuck. I was like, this is where the movie fucking takes a nosedive. I was so relieved that we didn't do that.
Yeah.
Please don't make her give birth to Satan or Antichrist. Like, it's just been done too many times. Yeah, also, shout out to Susan Blanchard, who is the actress that plays Kelly here. She did a fucking awesome job at being creepy once she's, like, awake and her skin's gone.
Dude, when she wakes up and looks over at Walter and smiles.
Oh,
like,
it's so good.
So creepy.
Yeah, it's so good. So, Satanic Kelly then sends Susan and Lisa after Walter, who immediately begins screaming to the group next door to hurry the fuck up because they are going to break down the door any minute. So, while Catherine continues to break through the last little bit of wall, we see Brian and Lomax clear the stuff from the door in preparation to make a run for it. But right as Brian opens the door, he immediately gets attacked by Mullins, who manages to spit green liquid into the face of Lomax. As Lomax goes down, we see Barack run up, stabbing Mullins in the eye with a chopstick, killing him. Catherine is then finally able to clear the last little bit of debris out of the hole, making room for Walter. And as Walter begins to climb into the other room, Lisa tries to go after him, but ends up getting beat to death by the others with bricks and tossed out of the window, which they also do to Susan as well. Meanwhile, next door, we see Satanic Kelly spot a makeup mirror on the floor, which really gets her excited as she begins to speak to it, saying, "Father," which causes a bright light to appear. She then sticks her fingers into the glass, which we see leads to another dark dimension. So basically, they need a mirror in order to access the doorway to this other dimension where Satan's father, aka the anti-god, is trapped in. That is actually the first time I watched it, I was confused about the little handheld mirror.
Yeah.
I was lost. I had to catch it on the second watch.
Well, yeah, I thought like when she first seen herself, she confused herself as her father.
I thought something
Yeah.
similar too. That's why I didn't understand the needing it for a doorway or whatever.
Yeah, it took the next mirror scene for me to figure out what was going on there.
So Kelly/Satan quickly realizes that this tiny little mirror is not a big enough doorway to pull her father back through. So she gets pissed and slams it on the floor, going in search of a much bigger doorway. And if you remember, there is a big ass mirror in the room that the priest and the possessed Calder are in, which is exactly where Kelly heads next. So we then see her walk up on this mirror and open the doorway, causing this huge beam of light to shoot out. And this is where the priest finally gets himself together and realizes that he must stop this from happening. He then begins looking for a weapon where he conveniently finds a nice new shiny axe. That was really lucky for him.
Yeah. Yeah, nice axe too.
It's
for
like
an
brand new.
abandoned building.
It's brand new right there where he was hiding. And while he begins to pray for the courage to attack Satan himself, we see Kelly stick her hand into the mirror, which is now basically like liquid metal. So this was obviously liquid mercury, which they got by draining it from their on-set hydraulic dollies and cranes, which they had for the cameras, which they did put back after they filmed this scene. And due to the mercury being highly toxic, a fake arm had to be made for the shot where Kelly reaches into the portal, which is the reason why her wristwatch is like super loose. It's not a real hand.
I on first watch, like I instantly thought liquid mercury. That's how they did this.
Mm-hmm.
But I absolutely love the like independent low budget movie stories like that. Like to know that they were so low on money, there was no way that they were going to get their hands on the amount of liquid mercury that they needed. So they literally figured out that they could drain the hydraulic cranes that they had on set that they had rented,
Yeah.
that they didn't even own, that they had rented. Take that out, use it for the movie, put it back, and then just return the cranes.
Yeah.
Like
Nothing ever
those
happened.
like background stories that you don't get on like big budget movies or I just absolutely love that.
Yeah, it's awesome. So, right as the priest begins sneaking up behind Kelly, Calder sees this and goes to stop him, but thankfully Brian comes up behind him, dragging him out into the hallway, leaving the priest with a clear shot at Kelly, to which he immediately chops off her arm. But unfortunately, this doesn't faze her as she looks at the priest in amusement as she immediately grows another arm back in its place. He then chops off her head, but that also doesn't have much of an effect as we then see her pick it up off the floor and reattach it. At this point, the priest kind of just backs off in fear and cowers in the corner as Kelly then reaches back into the portal and begins pulling the anti-god into this realm. And this is where we get our first real glimpse of this powerful anti-god as we see a big red hand with thick black claws grab Kelly's hand.
And the effects team did such a great job at like the growing the arm back and the decapitation. Everything with Kelly, she is so fucking creepy.
Yeah.
Just like Frank is the first thing the first image when I think of Hellraiser, where most people it's Pinhead, but I think of, like, Frank's fucking deteriorating fucking body.
Yeah.
Kelly is the first thing I think of when I think of this movie. Kelly and then fucking bug guy outside, his rotted up face.
So the Kelly is one of the main things I remember from me catching it on TV long time ago. Like, that was one of the things I was like, I have seen parts of this before because this is extremely familiar. Also, the hand in the mercury was another thing that really stuck out to me. We then see Catherine run out into the hallway where she sees Calder getting the best of Brian as they fight on the floor, and the priest cowering in the corner as Kelly pulls the anti-god through the bright portal. And this is where it hits her that they have pretty much lost the battle against evil, and she begins to sob. And it is at this point where she realizes that she is mankind's only hope left. She then takes off running full speed, tackling Kelly into the portal, where her, Kelly, and the anti-god go flying back into this dark dimension, when suddenly the priest throws the axe across the room, shattering the mirror and destroying the doorway, which effectively kills all of the possessed people in the church and ends this whole ordeal. And Brian, who is laying in the hallway, sees this and immediately screams no, realizing that Catherine is gone forever, and what's even worse is that she is now trapped in this horrible dimension with Satan and his extremely powerful father, where she will most likely be tortured forever.
Yeah, very interesting with Catherine having to choose between saving Brian, which was her own personal desires, or sacrificing herself for all of mankind. So Catherine is Jesus.
She's the new Jesus, and she's human. Yeah. The next morning, we see tons of authorities arrive and begin carrying out bodies, when one of them wheels out the priest, who is now strapped to a gurney, when Birak stops them to say goodbye to his friend. I was wondering, do you think he's strapped down because he's going to like a mental hospital?
I don't know, maybe.
Because he didn't get hurt. He threw the axe. Like, he never actually physically fought or fell or...
Well, no, he gets crushed. I don't know, like, he may have broke some bones, but yeah. So when she first walks in the room with the mirror, there's like this big machine. It's like, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But she literally like looks at him and laughs and slams him between that and the wall. Like, she literally just crushes him. And that's why he's on the floor when he grabs the axe. Now, he's obviously not fucked up enough where he wasn't able to throw the axe, but he did get crushed in there, so I assume he's pretty hurt.
Yeah, I thought that they were taking him to a mental hospital because he's like, I saved everybody. I stopped Satan.
Well, I did think it was really fucked up that Catherine made the ultimate sacrifice and literally throws herself in this dimension of hell, and he breaks the mirror and immediately takes credit
Yeah.
for... It was very Dr. Loomis. Like, he immediately takes credit.
He's gonna write a book.
I'm like, damn, he didn't even, like, consider saving Catherine. Like, or them, like, even having a conversation about it. He's just like, nope.
Yeah, somebody asked him, like, years later, like, well, what did Kelly look like when she was possessed by Satan? It's like, she had the blackest eyes. She was evil.
You look into it, you know what looking into the eyes of pure evil felt like.
Yeah, he's definitely going to write a book and profit from this whole thing.
Kelly is the boogeyman.
Yep. We then cut back to the creepy dream where we once again watch as the person walks along the gate while pointing the camera towards the church, as we hear the same message as before, but this time we don't see the large black figure in the doorway. This time we see the silhouette of Catherine. And then we finally hear the end of the message, as the voice says, "We are transmitting from the year 1999. As the camera then focuses, we see it is a now possessed Catherine as the voiceover says, "You are receiving this broadcast in order to alter the events you are seeing. Our technology is known to those with transmitters strong enough to reach your continuous state of awareness. But this is not a dream. You are seeing what is actually occurring for the purpose of casualty violation." Which we haven't actually heard that part
Yeah,
before.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the first time it's played through.
Yeah, and as the message ends, we see Brian suddenly wake up in his bed, but as he breathes a sigh of relief and turns over, he is immediately shocked by the sight of a skinless Catherine laying next to him. It is then revealed that this was also a dream as he wakes up in his bed alone, completely drenched in sweat. And that is the end of Prince of Darkness.
Yeah, so very, very open ending here. I guess there's it's very ambiguous. Was Brian just having a nightmare? Was that
Yeah.
actually just a nightmare? Was he not having a nightmare and he was actually seeing Catherine in there
Like a
and
new message.
she was, essentially that's Catherine and she's been tortured? Was Catherine the actual chosen one the whole time that was supposed to be the embodiment of evil? One thing I did think was really cool though is Catherine is standing there with her arms spread out as if was pinned to a cross, which
Yeah.
is I think is a very good metaphor for Jesus dying for everybody's sins on the cross and Catherine sacrificing herself for the sake of humanity. You can take the ending obviously however you want. There's no John Carpenter's never come out and said, it was
And
this
he
way.
never will.
No, because he didn't write it to be a certain way.
It's like The
Um,
Thing. The
yeah.
ending of The Thing.
I take it as, it was probably more so a dream, and he was seeing Catherine spread out like that because she was the savior. She literally sacrificed herself for humanity. But yeah, I thought it was a really cool ending. One of the big changes that they did for the TV version of it was that in the very beginning, he wakes up from a dream and they do that weird, like, kinda what they used to do back in the day when somebody would wake up from a dream sequence and the screen would have that effect to it, that almost
Yeah, yeah.
waving effect.
Mhm.
And then they have him here wake up with that same waving effect, implying that
Oh,
the
was the
whole
whole thing
thing
was
was
a
a
dream.
dream.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I did see somebody talking about that at some point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which I think is awful. I think the actual theatrical version and the version that we covered was much better.
Well, there's no way you'd have a dream that detailed and intricate with that many characters, and yeah, I don't think that's the case at all. So a couple facts. Most of them we already touched on. So remember, Carpenter had a 3-picture deal with Alive Films. Well, he actually only made 2 films under this deal. I could not for the life of me find out what happened with the 3rd film. It just didn't happen for some reason. But the second movie he made for them was another cult classic, They Live, which came out just a year after this movie. So this last one is actually how they made the liquid Satan tank, according to a special effects crew member who helped build it. Which, by the way, this was really difficult to find, like how they built it. This was kind of challenging. So they cut a 55-gallon drum into 2 pieces, one for the top and one for the bottom. And they attached acrylic tubes to the side that had fluorescent lights in them. Inside the tank lid, they placed a metal fan grill that housed a couple of floodlights. They then placed a second clear acrylic tube wrapped in green lighting gel into the center of the main clear acrylic tube where they could place lights, which would then light the fluid from behind. Next, they dumped vegetable oil and a metallic green powdered paint pigment into the tube to act as the swirly green liquid we see spinning around inside. They then put a windshield wiper motor out of a crew member's car and used this to spin around the green liquid, which was attached to the inside of the lid. The reason they used the powdered green pigment was because it wouldn't actually dissolve and mix into the vegetable oil, allowing it to give off different shades and tones of green while it spun around. And finally, the outside of the canister had a two-part foam that would harden, allowing them to paint it and cover it in white sugar, giving it a corroded look. So, well, overall, a pretty simple design that didn't require any complicated pumps or post-production animation. What we see on film is what it looked like in person. They basically just made a clear tube inside of another clear tube, put some lights in it, and a small motor that just stirred a bunch of oil and green color around.
Well, what's cool is they have lamps like this you can actually buy, like little lamps that will have like the glittery color
Yeah.
pigments and stuff in
Mhm.
it that'll spin. And I mean, it's really cool that before those were mass produced, they were making them on movies and like making giant versions of them. And that goes back to, those awesome stories of low budget filmmaking, like them having to overcome their budget constraints.
Well, so another thing about this is this version was made on the fly because the first design that they tried to use completely fucking sucked and didn't work. So they ended up having to scour what they had, which is how they ended up pulling the windshield wiper motor out of a car because they were like, we've got to figure out something right now because we have to shoot this shit like in 2 days.
Yeah.
So, and then the last really interesting thing is this almost got destroyed right after they built it because the scene where they possessed Lisa and Susan, the possessed Lisa and Susan, they move it from the basement to the room. It actually started to fall over and hit the ground, but a couple of crew members were able to catch it before it actually hit.
That
Yeah.
thing was probably heavy too.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, just the on the fly having to come up with solutions that we don't get in like big budget movies nearly as much. I love those stories. The stories of like, the guerrilla shooting style of you talk about like Maniac of them having to literally go on set and shoot it because they didn't have permits because they didn't have the money for them. And I love those about the independent films.
All right, so ratings and kill count. We have a total of 11 kills. We have the priest guy who died at the beginning from being fucking old. Etchison, who was stabbed by a broken bicycle. Susan, who was possessed. Mullins, who had his neck snapped. Frank, stabbed to death and then taken over by bugs. Lisa was possessed. Calder had his throat slit and possessed. Kelly was taken over by Satan. Professor Leahy was possessed. Lomax had possession juice spit all over his face. And Catherine sacrificed herself to save the world by tackling Satan into another dimension. It's all 11. What's your favorite kill?
I gotta go with the bug guy, the
Frank?
Frank. Yeah.
Okay.
So just his whole, not his necessarily his death scene, but the whole scene of him rising with the bugs and speaking in the creepy voice, giving them the message. That shit always sticks in my head. I love everything about that scene. And then my number two would have to be Kelly because she just looked absolutely fucking like she's the coolest looking thing in this movie. I thought when she was in her Freddy Krueger phase that she was already fucked. Like, she's like, even if they had saved everything at that point, she was beyond saving. Like,
Yeah,
she
yeah.
was toast at that point. And then they kept it going, and her whole fucking skin was melted off, and it was just awesome looking.
I actually picked the same two, but in other order. Mine was Kelly turning into Freddy Krueger and Frank. Yep.
Yeah, both good ones.
All right, so what's your rating?
I gave this movie a 4.2. I think this movie was far ahead of its time as far as the mix in the science and religion and horror. It's a very unique satanic Catholic horror like no other. Like, you don't really think about it, but this is a satanic horror movie too. although it does not feel like that.
I mean, the Catholic Church is
It's
somewhat involved.
Yeah, it's literally religious, sci-fi, and satanic horror all mixed together. And I thought mixed together in a genius way. Like I said, I love that they used the real science to really back the plot and advance the story. I thought the imagery was fantastic. The cinematography was fantastic. The nightmare sequences, the way they shot it, with the shaky found footage, and then took that and put it through a TV and filmed it again. Thought those scenes were super fucking creepy. The makeup effects were 10 out of 10 when it comes to Kelly and Frank. And as always with John Carpenter movies, the score was fucking fantastic. Like, that is one thing with all his movies, no matter
Yeah,
what, the
yeah.
scores are fucking great. I definitely think this movie gets overlooked due to the success of other John Carpenter films, and also that people like to be spoon-fed. I think this movie got a ton of bad criticism from the critics who like to be spoon-fed and have easy stories, and this is a story that you really, yeah, if you want to get the most out of the movie, you really gotta pay attention to the story. And kinda, if you know a little bit about the actual, like, quantum physics and religion, you actually pay attention, this is a really, really cool story.
Yeah, I gave it a 4.1. We're pretty close. I enjoyed a lot about it. It was shot very nicely. The acting was good. Great effects. The thing I enjoyed the most is the unique story. It was something different. It was something new. The pacing of the story kept me into it. That's another really important thing about it. And it left me thinking about it for days after, which I think is the sign of a great storytelling. My negatives was there are a lot of characters to keep track of, especially if this is your first time watch. In my opinion, this story goes down a lot smoother the second and third time once you're a lot more acquainted with everybody.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think the second watch was a much easier watch.
Yeah, and then my biggest nitpick is the end. Not the very, very end, I like that, but I feel like in the grand scheme of things, Satan was not anywhere near as challenging to take down as you would think. I feel
Maybe it was written in that book. That's
yeah,
why they had to get Lisa,
I
'cause
mean,
they're like, "Break the mirror."
essentially, just push him into a mirror and break the mirror is pretty easy.
Or just make sure there's no mirrors around.
Yeah, I mean, I would have liked to have seen Satan a little bit harder to defeat because once he takes over Kelly's body, Satan himself doesn't really do anything. He just kind of sends his possessed people to do it. And
Well, that's one cool thing, though, about the ambiguous ending is, it does imply, if you wanna take it as not just a nightmare, that they didn't really stop it. Like, it's still gonna in the year 1999, this is still gonna be the case, but Catherine's gonna be the one standing in this church
yeah, I
doorway.
like that a lot better. But and that goes along with what I said. Like after I watched it the first time, like I literally kind of thought about the implications and what this meant, and just how I thought a lot about it.
And
Basically,
I mean, he does say your plutonium god, essentially, like you said, religious and science will not stop me. It's too late.
yeah. Well, that's it for Prince of Darkness. We finally covered it. You finally got it off your plate.
I did. It was a long time coming.
Yeah, it was every week I was like, all right, what your movie? It would be like a movie and Prince of Darkness. It would always be against Prince of Darkness. So it's an end of an era here.
It's Ozzy. Ozzy died, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh, it's the time to do the Prince of Darkness.
And it's also just about the end of season 2. So once again, we thank you guys for listening. Please give us a follow or like if you enjoy the show. Check out the websites, check out the socials. Tell a friend, a family member, or alien Jesus about the show. And we hope to see you next time.